Hi, and thank you for stopping by my channel. A Square Pillow Isn't Square, the place where you'll learn anything and everything you wanted to know about home deck sewing. Well, finally, I'm getting around to make a video, thank you to the viewer that prompted me to do it, about how to make a basic lined drapery panel. All you really need to make a drapery panel is a place to make it. Obviously I have my nice work table here, but if you have a large floor that you can pad and protect from heat and steam, that will work just fine too. You'll need a nice drapery weight fabric, nothing super thick and stiff and heavy like upholstery fabric. And for a lined drapery, you don't want anything too loosely woven, flimsy, or sheer either. So basic drapery weight fabric and a nice quality lining. Let's start figuring out our cuts. Take your finished length and add 8 inches for a double bottom 4-inch hem. There's reasons for this, I'll get into those later, but you're going to start out finished length plus 8 inches for your bottom hem. For your top hem, they vary. Usually there's 2 standard top hem sizes. For most pleated styles, if you're doing 1 finger, 2 finger, 3 finger pleats, or even a back tab panel, generally you're going to want to allow another 8 inches for another double 4-inch top hem. So almost always, I'm usually doing some kind of pleated header, I will allow 16 inches in addition to my finished length. The only reason you're going to have to add more than that is if you have a strong pattern repeat, you want all of your panels to match, and you're going to have to possibly add extra length to work within your pattern repeat. There is a video I'll link to here about working with pattern repeat, but for this I'm doing a single panel. I'm not going to worry about it. I'm going to make an 84-inch panel. I'm going to have a double 4-inch bottom hem, a double 4-inch top hem. I'm going to add 16 inches to my cut. So my face fabric, I'm going to cut at 100 inches. The lining is a little bit different. I always add 3 inches to the finished length of my drapery for my lining cut. The reason for that is that the top of the lining cut is only going to come to the very top finished length of the drapery. There's nothing extra at the top that's going to fold over and add bulk and be unnecessary. So I'm basically going to take the finished length of my drapery. I'm going to allow a double 2-inch bottom hem. So that's going to be 4 inches extra. So why are you only adding 3 inches, you ask? Well, you'll see when I put it together, but the drapery lining is actually going to be pulled up about 1 inch above the double bottom hem, and again I'll tell you why we do that. But simple, easy math for lining. Finished length plus 3 inches. So 84-inch finished length, I'm going to cut my lining at 87. I'm going to go ahead and make my cuts. Alright, I'll start with my lining. You will have the wrong side up, and whenever I'm doing double hems, in this case again I'm doing a double 2-inch hem, instead of folding up 2 inches and then 2 inches, I found you get a more accurate finish, more accurate length if you start by folding up the total number of inches of your hem. So in this case it's 4 inches. I'm going to simply fold up my 4-inch allowance for my bottom hem, like so. And then I fold to the fold, and it's very easy to just sort of line up your raw edge to your fold line and roll it in, and I just sort of use my fingers to kind of tap it down as I go. Double 2-inch hem. We're going to just pin this in place and take it to the sewing machine, and on the lining we're going to top stitch the hem down. Now we're doing our face fabric, again, wrong side up. Make sure you've made a note of what the top and the bottom of your fabric was when you cut it. You want to make sure you're consistent there and that you are indeed going to turn your bottom hem up from the bottom of the fabric, not the top. And using the exact same principle, this is going to be a double 4-inch hem. So I'm going to fold up 8 inches. If you don't have these fantastic lines on your cutting table, like I do, obviously you're just going to take, you know, any kind of straight edge or ruler, yardstick, tape measure, and you're just going to measure up 8 inches. I did a video on how I make my work table tops, well actually how I build the whole table, and specifically how I make this top that you can iron on, so I will try and remember to link to that here for you. So I've got my 8 inches turned up, and using the exact same method as with the lining, I'm going to fold to my fold, raw edge to the fold, and roll it on up. For those of you that are going to ask about my iron, for drapery work, I have always, except when I had my big professional workroom, I've always used these Rowenta Perfect Steam irons. I'll link, set up a shopping link in the video description if you're interested in getting one. All right, when it comes to the hem on your face fabric, I do not top stitch this hem because on the front of my drapery, to make a very professional looking finish, I don't want any visible stitching unless it's absolutely necessary. I have a video about 3 ways to professionally finish hems, and I will link to that there. I happen to have a blind stitch machine, so I'm going to blind stitch this hem. You can use a blind stitch on a household machine, will often have a blind stitch setting, or you can actually do a whip stitch, sew it by hand, and I show all those things in that video about how to finish hems. But I'm going to go ahead and blind stitch the face fabric top hem, and that's next. Next, side hems. First thing you're going to do is lay your face fabric wrong side up, and this is really important. You're going to want to make sure that it's really flat and really square. No twerking, no crookedness, no lumps and bumps. I'll often use a big ruler like this to kind of smooth everything out. So once you have that nice and flat and straight and square, you're going to lay your lining on top. And you're going to lay your lining right side facing up, so the wrong sides are together. All right, and you will kind of center that on your face fabric. So, you know, drapery fabrics come in a variety of widths. They're generally about 54 inches, but they're going to vary. And lining fabrics can vary anywhere from 48 to 54 inches as well. I usually always get 54-inch lining to make sure that it's big enough for whatever project I'm working on. But you're going to center your lining, and you're going to place it about 1 inch above the bottom of your face fabric, like this.
So you may be wondering why we keep the face fabric and lining layers separate like this. Well, there's actually a really good reason for it. If you can imagine that the lining fabric is made out of cotton polyester and the face fabric is made out of linen, over time with heat, humidity, and gravity, these two layers might stretch or shrink differently over time. By keeping these two layers hanging freely and only attached on the side, it makes sure that you don't get any bunching or bowing or bagging that you would have if these two layers were sewn together and responding to the environment in two different ways.
I'm going to take my straight edge and smooth that out. And now we're going to press in the side hems. The way that I do that is I will press in a double 1.5 inch side hem on both sides, which is standard custom drapery. It's double 1.5, so I'll fold in 3 inches on each side, open that up. I'm going to do one other little step in there I'll show you in a minute, and then I'll fold to the fold, same exact thing.
So you're probably asking, why do we do side hems this way? Why don't we do a simpler seam, a knife edge seam perhaps, or something that uses less fabric? There's actually really good answers for all of those questions. First of all, when you have a nice, generous 1.5 inch double fold side hem, it creates a nice, stable side to your drapery. It helps keep that long edge hanging nice and straight. When you tack all of your layers together, a good 1.5 inches from the edge of the drapery, you are ensuring that the edge of that drapery is always going to lay flat. The drapery fabric and the lining fabric are not going to gap or come apart or separate and create something on the side where if you're looking at the side of the drapery panel, you can see the lining gaping away, or you can ever see the lining fabric from inside the home. So it's just basically one of these things that we always do in custom drapery to make sure that we get the best, most professional looking finish possible.
I'm going to fold up 3 inches. I'm going to press both these layers together. One little step I do before I do my fold. So I'm going to open this back up, and you can really easily see this crease line on the lining. I want to get rid of that extra bulk on the lining. So I'm going to carefully take my scissors and make sure I'm not cutting my face fabric, and I'm going to cut right on that fold. If you have good scissors like me, you can literally slice right down to make your life easy. And now that I've gotten rid of that bulk, I can fold to my fold. pin that in place, and then I'm going to show you a way that we're going to finish the bottom hems. Drapery weights are another completely standard custom item that you'll see on each side of a drapery panel. And what it helps to do is not only does as I said, that not only does the hem help weight the drapery down, but a weight in the bottom of each side seam also helps keep that drapery hanging straight and keeps the corners from flaring out. So before I sew this, we're going to talk a little bit about drapery weights. This is completely optional. It depends on if you're sewing professionally for clients or just, you know, making something for your kids' room. But you should at least know about it and know how to do it so you can do it right. All right, I'll move my camera. Be right back. These are the type of drapery weights that I like. As you can see, it's a full square leaded weight, and it has a nice big tab at the top that makes it really easy to attach to the inside of your drapery. The place where these drapery weights go is a little above the bottom of the hem, about an inch above the bottom of the hem, and you want to make sure that that first fold, is that the weight doesn't interfere with that fold. So if it means you have to move off a little bit, that's fine. And it doesn't matter exactly, you don't really have to measure up. I just eyeball it about an inch up from the bottom. And this is, I use a fabric stapler a lot. I haven't really talked about that yet. It's got a specific kind of staple that's designed, a chisel point staple that's designed specifically for fabric. And it comes in super handy for projects like this. This is something that is never going to be seen, and speed and quickness is money saved. So I will put this where I want it, and I will simply put one or two staples on the top of that drapery weight. It's never going to go anywhere, and because I put it on this very outside edge, the back of these back prongs are never seen. I simply tuck it in like that, and you can really feel it. You've got a beautiful weighted hem. I'm just going to go ahead and insert a drapery weight on the other side. I'll look and see if this is something that's available online, and I will post a shopping link to it if I can find one. There's also, when you get these, they also come with a special, I can get a special little staple remover that's specifically designed for these staples. I'll show you. And it's just really easy. It just slides right under and they pop right out. So there's a lot of times when I'm doing hems that it's actually quicker to staple and remove the staples. Oops, I went too far. Than it is to pin and unpin. So I'm just going to leave one in there. It's a demo. It's all good. Okay. All right, going to do the other side. And then I'm just going to talk to you about the way that I sew these down once the weights are in. When I sew my side hem, I'm going to do it the same way that I sewed my bottom hem so that there's no visible stitching. I'm going to use my blind hemmer. The blind hemmer will still catch through all layers, but just like in a little tiny dot. You can't even see it, but it keeps these layers attached to each other right here. If you don't have a blind hemmer or a blind hem stitch, I highly recommend hand stitching these side hems. Another little tip that you may know if you're a sewer is that when you are sewing layers together on the crosswise grain of the fabric, you often don't have any kind of a puckering problem. But when you are sewing a long seam down the lengthwise grain of the fabric, you will probably notice that that seam, no matter how you set your tension, is going to tend to pucker. So top stitching through all these layers not only gives you a big long visible stitching line on the outside, it also can encourage draw up or puckering of that long seam. The last thing I want to tell you is that whether you start at the bottom or the top when you're sewing the seam, you want to make sure that your sewing machine is not going to hit this weight. You will break a needle, you will knock your timing out. So it kind of helps too to get above the bulk of all these hems on my blind hemmer. So I'll usually start sewing about 5 or 6 inches, stop or start depending on which direction I'm going, about 6 inches from the bottom, and then I will just whip stitch, I'll hand stitch the rest. And last little professional tip, if you're doing what I'm doing and you have a weight in here and you're hand stitching this bottom, and I'll show it to you later, I'll show you what it looks like. You will often see on custom drapery, they even take this little triangle and they will just whip stitch like this. That prevents the bottom hem from ever showing on the front of the drapery. Custom professional little touches that will just set your work above and beyond. As you can see already, if I were to just sew this down, you can see how that hem looks like it wants to get a little bit longer. That's going to show from the front. So I'm going to show you how I finish it. Let's go to the machine. I almost forgot to mention that before I take this off the table to sew my hems down, I will often fold in my final finished top hem length at this point. While it's all nice and square and straight, it's easier to fold it in now than it is to take the whole lined panel and spread it all out again and try and get it this perfect. So before I even take this off to do my side hems, I will usually at this point fold in my top hem. If you don't have a table like mine, the easiest thing to do is to measure from the bottom with a tape measure. Maybe have somebody help you hold it right at the bottom and measure up to your finished length. Again, mine is 84 inches. I'm going to fold it in to 84 inches. And that way, this whole thing will be pretty much folded to its finished size before I do any more sewing. Help hold it all together. At this point too, if you find you have any extra lining, this is so minimal, I'm not going to worry about it. But if you happen to have some extra lining, we're going to do the same thing we did on our side hems. You know, take out your pin here and just trim that off to get rid of some of that bulk at the top. Oh, and at this point, I don't do my final fold. I kind of just do a fold where I know my top hem is, and to keep things from shifting, I'll just stick some pins through all layers so that when I take it off the table and bring it back, and it's all together. Saves me time later. All right, I finished this by just getting a needle and doing a quick little whip stitch. Then when I tie it off, I'll do a double knot, and then I'll usually feed this needle up into the fabric like that. so that I also don't have any little threads showing. And now I have a perfect seam, a perfect bottom. My layers, as you can see, are stuck together, so no gaping on the sides. I'm almost ready to finish my top. Now, because I have already pinned this all in place, I don't have to worry too much at this point about getting too caught up with laying it out perfectly flat again. As long as my very top hem area is straight, I don't really have to worry about the rest of this panel, because now I just want to finish my hem. Now that it's all aligned, it's not going anywhere, I can take out my pins. All right, so I'm just going to press in my double 4-inch hem, and it'll fall right where that press line was. You don't have to measure, it's right there. Just roll that in so that your cut edge is, you can kind of feel it touching your fold. The top hem, unless you're doing some kind of a pleat, you're going to want to top stitch this down. If you're doing a pleat, you don't need to, and I'll get into that in another video. But right now, I'm going to top stitch this and hang it up. It's finished. Easy, professional, done.
If you like this video, please consider subscribing to my channel, and that way you'll be notified every time I post a new video. Thanks for watching, and happy sewing!